Katie Sullivan wiped the grease from her hands and checked the fusion reactor readings one more time. The numbers looked good. Power output was steady at 92%, well within normal range for the colony's daily needs. She smiled as she closed the maintenance panel. Another day of keeping the lights on for 10,000 people. The power station hummed quietly around her. Katie had worked here for 3 years, ever since she turned 17 and finished her technical training. She knew every pipe, every wire, every safety system in the building. The other workers often joked that Katie could fix the reactors, with her eyes closed. They were probably right. New Haven was not a fancy place. The colony sat on a rocky planet at the edge of known space, where the air was thin and the weather was harsh. But it was home to Katie and everyone else who lived there. Families had built lives here, children played in the protected domes. Old people sat on benches and told stories about Earth, the planet most of them had never seen. Katie walked to the main control room where her supervisor, Pete Davis, was checking the morning reports. Pete was 50 years old and had been running the power station since the colony was built. He treated Katie like the daughter he never had. "Everything running smooth today?" Pete asked without looking up from his screen. "Perfect as always," Katie replied. "Reactor 2 is making a little noise, but nothing serious. I'll check it again this afternoon." Pete nodded. He trusted Katie completely. In 3 years, she had never let him down. The girl had a gift for understanding machines, and more importantly, she cared about doing her job right. The morning passed like any other. Katie worked through her checklist, testing systems and checking equipment. She was replacing a worn bearing in Pump 7 when the alarm started screaming. The sound was different from the normal maintenance alarms Katie heard every day. This was the emergency signal that meant real danger. Katie dropped her tools and ran to the control room where Pete was staring at the main display screen. "What's happening?" Katie asked. Pete's face was pale. "Ships in orbit. Big ones. They're demanding we surrender." Katie looked at the screen. The images came from the colony's defense satellites showing massive dark vessels hanging in space above their planet. The ships were larger than anything Katie had ever seen. They looked like metal cities floating in the void. "Who are they?" Katie asked. "Dominion Empire," Pete said quietly. "I've heard stories. They take over planets and make the people work for them. They've been hitting human colonies all across this sector." Katie felt cold fear in her stomach, but she pushed it down. "What do they want from us?" "The mineral deposits. This planet has rare metals they need for their ships." Pete turned to face her. "They're ordering everyone to report to the main square. They want to talk to the colony leaders." Through the control room windows, Katie could see people walking through the streets. They moved slowly, like they were in a dream. Parents carried small children. Old people leaned on walking sticks. Everyone looked scared. "We should go," Pete said. "If we don't show up, they might hurt people." Katie shook her head. "Someone needs to stay here. If the power goes out, people will die. The life support systems in the residential domes won't last 6 hours without power." Pete started to argue, but Katie cut him off. "You go. Represent the power station. I'll keep everything running." Pete looked like he wanted to say more, but the alarms kept screaming. Finally, he nodded and headed for the door. "Be careful, Katie. These people are dangerous." After Pete left, Katie tried to focus on her work, but it was hard to concentrate. Through the station's communication system, she could hear voices from the main square. The Dominion commander was speaking to the colonists. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated by computers into human language. "This planet now belongs to the Dominion Empire. You will work for us. You will obey our orders. Anyone who resists will be punished." Katie turned off the communication system. She did not want to hear any more. An hour later, the power station door opened. Katie looked up from her work to see 3 tall figures in dark armor walking toward her. They were not human. Their faces were covered by helmets, but Katie could see their eyes glowing behind the faceplates. "You," one of them said in that same mechanical voice. "Why are you not with the others?" Katie stood up straight. "Someone has to keep the power running. People need electricity to live." Give us the access codes to your systems, the alien said. We will control the power now. Katie shook her head. I can't do that. The alien stepped closer. Katie could smell something strange like metal and chemicals. You will obey or you will be punished. The life support systems are complicated, Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. If you don't know how to run them properly, people will die. Children, old people, sick people. They need the power to survive. That is not our concern, the alien replied. Give us the codes. Katie crossed her arms. No, the alien made a sound that might have been laughter. Humans are all the same. You think you are brave, but you are just stupid. We have conquered 47 human colonies. They all surrendered when they saw our power. Well, this one won't, Katie said. The aliens talked to each other in their own language for a few minutes. Katie could not understand the words, but she could tell they were discussing what to do with her. Finally, the leader turned back to Katie. You will come with us. Our commander wants to speak with you. I told you I need to stay here and keep the power running. The alien pulled out a weapon that looked like a metal rod with lights on it. You will come now, or we will kill you now. Either way, we will take control of your power station. Katie realized she had no choice. But as the aliens led her toward the door, she managed to brush against her tool belt. Hidden inside one of the pockets was a small emergency beacon that she used to call for help when equipment broke down in remote areas. Katie pressed the activation button and hoped that someone, somewhere, would hear the signal. The aliens took Katie to a shuttlecraft that was waiting outside the power station. As they flew up toward the big ships in space, Katie looked down at New Haven. The colony looked so small from up here, just a few domes and buildings on a rock floating in the darkness. But those buildings were full of people, families, friends. People who depended on Katie to keep their lights on and their air clean. She had failed them by letting the aliens capture her, but maybe someone would get her emergency signal. Maybe help would come. The shuttle docked with the largest ship Katie had ever seen. The alien who seemed to be in charge walked her through corridors that stretched for miles. Everything was made of dark metal and strange lights. The air smelled wrong. Finally, they reached a large room where a bigger alien was waiting. This one wore more decorations on its armor and spoke without the mechanical translator. So, the alien said in perfect human speech, you are the one who refuses to cooperate. Katie lifted her chin. I'm the one who won't let you hurt my people. The alien laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your people belong to the Dominion. Empire now. And you, little human, are going to help us teach them a lesson about obedience. We are going to broadcast your punishment to every world in our empire. When humans across the galaxy see what happens to those who resist us, they will think twice about defying the Dominion. Katie felt her heart beating fast, but she kept her voice steady. Do whatever you want to me. It won't change anything. And the alien smiled, showing teeth like broken glass. We shall see. The cell was small and cold. Katie sat on the metal bench that served as both chair and bed, listening to the sounds of the ship around her. Strange noises echoed through the walls. Alien voices spoke in languages she could not understand. The air tasted like metal and made her throat dry. She had been locked up for 2 days now. Every few hours, guards brought her water and something that might have been food. It tasted terrible, but Katie forced herself to eat it. She needed to stay strong. The alien commander, who called himself Admiral Vex Korthak, had visited her several times. Each time he asked the same questions. Would she give them the power station codes? Would she help them control the colony? Would she tell other humans to surrender without fighting? Each time, Katie gave the same answer. No. On the morning of the third day, the cell door opened and Admiral Korthak entered with 2 guards. The admiral was tall and thin, with dark blue skin and eyes like black diamonds. His uniform was covered with medals and symbols that Katie did not recognize. Today is Unity Day, the admiral said. A celebration of our empire's power and glory. Billions of beings across the galaxy will watch the ceremonies, and they will watch you die. Katie looked up at him. Is that supposed to scare me? You should be afraid, Korthak replied. When we broadcast your execution, every human in the galaxy will see what happens to those who resist the Dominion. Your death will save lives by preventing future rebellions. Or it might show them that humans don't give up easily, Katie said. Korthak made a sound like grinding gears. We shall see. The guards took Katie from her cell and led her through the ship's corridors. The vessel was enormous, bigger than some cities Katie had seen. They passed rooms full of alien soldiers, laboratories with strange equipment, and control centers where dozens of beings worked at computer stations. Finally, they reached a large chamber with bright lights and cameras. Katie realized this was where they planned to kill her in front of the entire galaxy. The room was designed like a theater, with a raised platform in the center and viewing areas around the edges. Aliens in fancy uniforms filled the viewing seats. They talked and laughed like they were attending a party. To them, Katie's death was entertainment. Admiral Korthak walked to the center of the platform. A camera floated in the air nearby, recording everything. Red lights on the walls showed that the broadcast was going out live to countless worlds. Citizens of the Dominion Empire, Korthak began. Today we celebrate another year of peace and prosperity under our rule. As part of today's ceremonies, we will demonstrate what happens to those who oppose our authority. The camera turned to Katie. She stood straight and tried not to show her fear. Somewhere out there, people were watching. Maybe some of them were human. Maybe some of them would remember her. This human refused to cooperate with our occupation of her planet, Korthak continued. She thought she could defy the might of the Dominion Empire. Today she learns the price of such foolishness. Korthak gestured to Katie. Do you have any final words? Would you like to beg for mercy? Would you like to tell your people to surrender? Katie looked directly into the camera. She thought about New Haven, about Pete and the other workers, about the families living in the colony domes. She thought about all the human worlds that might be watching. I won't beg, Katie said. And I won't tell my people to give up. We're not perfect, but we take care of each other. We don't abandon our friends. We don't let bullies push us around. Some of the aliens in the audience made angry noises. They expected her to cry and plead for her life. Katie kept talking. I worked at a power station. My job was to keep the lights on for 10,000 people. Children, parents, grandparents, all depending on me to do my job right. I never let them down, and I won't start now. Enough, Korthak said. But Katie was not finished. To anyone watching this who thinks they're alone, you're not. There are good people everywhere, on every world, in every system. They might be scared right now, but they're still there. And as long as there are good people, there's hope. Korthak raised his weapon. Any last words? Katie smiled. Tell my people that I kept the lights on. The weapon fired. Katie Sullivan fell to the floor and did not move again. The aliens in the audience cheered. Admiral Korthak smiled with satisfaction. The broadcast continued for several more minutes, showing Katie's body and explaining to viewers what would happen to anyone who resisted the Dominion. What the Admiral did not know was that Katie's emergency beacon had been received 3 days earlier by a human ship in the next system. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison aboard the deep space vessel Defiant had been tracking Dominion movements for months. When he got Katie's signal, he immediately changed course toward New Haven. Jake was 35 years old and had served in the human space fleet for 15 years. He was not a hero or a famous leader. He was just a man who believed that people should help each other when they could. When he learned that humans were in trouble, he came to help. But Jake was not alone. As news of the Dominion attack spread, through human communication networks, other ships began moving toward New Haven. Captain Linda Hayes of the cargo freighter Liberty changed her course from a routine supply run. Colonel Ryan Brooks received the message at a hidden military base and began mobilizing his forces. The broadcast of Katie's execution reached these ships just as they were approaching Dominion space. Jake watched the transmission on his ship's main screen, along with his crew of 43 men and women. The bridge was silent as Katie spoke her final words. When the weapon fired, several crew members turned away. Others clenched their fists in anger. Sir, said Communications Officer Betty Clark. "We're receiving signals from other human vessels. 46 ships are now en route to this system." Jake nodded. "Any word from the colonies?" "Yes, sir. We're getting reports from human settlements across 12 systems. They saw the broadcast too." Chief Engineer Danny Miller looked up from his station. "Commander, I'm reading some unusual activity on the communication networks. Looks like humans throughout the galaxy are sending messages to each other." Jake had expected this. Humans were spread across hundreds of worlds throughout the Dominion Empire. Most of them worked in support roles, maintaining equipment, processing data, transporting supplies. The Dominion considered them harmless because they seemed weak and scattered. But Jake knew better. Humans had been building networks for decades. They shared information, helped each other find jobs, sent money to families on distant worlds. The Dominion saw these connections as harmless social activity. They did not realize they were looking at the foundation of a resistance movement. "What kind of messages?" Jake asked. "Codes, sir. Looks like activation signals for sleeper cells. Also getting reports of equipment failures at Dominion facilities. Power outages, communication breakdowns, transport delays." Jake felt a cold smile cross his face. "How many facilities?" "Over 300 so far, sir, and the number is growing." On the main screen, the Dominion broadcast continued. Admiral Korthak was explaining to the galaxy how the Empire's power could not be challenged. He talked about their mighty fleets, their advanced technology, their thousands of years of conquest. He did not mention that human technicians maintained much of that technology. He did not talk about the human workers who kept his ships running, who processed his communications, who transported his supplies. He did not think about what might happen if those humans decided to stop cooperating. Jake turned to his crew. "Send a message to all human vessels in the area. Tell them we're not here for revenge. We're here to rescue our people and go home. But if the Dominion wants a fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." "Sir," said Betty Clark, "I'm getting reports of Dominion fleet movements. They're mobilizing to respond to our presence." "How many ships?" "At least 200, sir, including the dreadnought that killed Katie Sullivan." Jake looked at the tactical display. 47 human ships against 200 Dominion vessels. The odds were impossible. But Jake had been reading the reports from across the galaxy. Equipment failures were spreading through the Dominion Empire like a disease. Power grids were going down. Communication networks were crashing. Supply ships were disappearing. Katie Sullivan's death had done something the Dominion never expected. It had reminded every human in the galaxy that they were not alone. It had shown them that courage was not about being strong enough to win. It was about caring enough to try. "All ships," Jake said into his communicator. "This is Commander Morrison. We're going to bring our people home, whatever it takes." The human fleet moved toward the Dominion ships, 47 vessels carrying the hopes of an entire species. Behind them, across the galaxy, the real battle was just beginning. The moment Katie Sullivan died, something changed across the galaxy. It was not magic or science fiction. It was simply the power of human beings who had finally seen enough. On the mining world of Taurus 7, mechanic Tom Chen was fixing a Dominion transport ship when he received a coded message on his personal communicator. The message was simple. The lights went out. Turn off the power. Tom looked at the ship's engine he was repairing, smiled grimly, and removed a critical component. The ship would never fly again. On the trading station at Beta Centauri, data processor Mary Williams was working the night shift when her screen flashed with an encrypted signal. She had been waiting for this message for 3 years. Mary began typing commands into her computer, systematically deleting navigation databases that controlled shipping routes throughout the sector. Within minutes, hundreds of cargo ships would be lost in space with no way to find their destinations. In the communications center on Proxima Colony, technician Steve Johnson received the same signal. He looked around the room at his alien supervisors, then quietly began installing a virus into the main communication array. The virus would spread through the network, shutting down military communications across 40 star systems. This was happening everywhere. Humans who had worked quietly for the Dominion Empire for years were suddenly revealing their true purpose. They were not just workers or servants. They were a resistance network that had been preparing for this moment. The Dominion had made a crucial mistake. They thought humans were weak because they usually avoided direct confrontation. They did not realize that humans were simply patient. For decades, humans had been placed in support roles throughout the Empire. They maintained the ships, processed the data, transported the supplies, and kept the systems running. The Dominion gave them these jobs because they considered such work beneath the notice of superior alien races. But every human worker was also a potential saboteur. Every human technician knew how to break the systems they were paid to fix. Every human pilot knew how to disappear with their cargo. Every human programmer knew how to crash the computers they were supposed to maintain. The Dominion had scattered humans across the galaxy and put them in positions where they could do the most damage. They had built their empire on the backs of the very people they oppressed. Now those people were withdrawing their support all at once. Minute 1. The signal spread through hidden communication networks to every human settlement in Dominion space. The message was always the same. Katie Sullivan is dead. The lights went out. It's time. Minute 3. Equipment failures began appearing throughout the Empire. Fusion reactors shut down mysteriously. Computer systems crashed for no apparent reason. Transport ships lost their navigation systems. The failures seemed random, but they were actually coordinated attacks on the Empire's infrastructure. Minute 5. Dominion military commanders began receiving reports of problems from across their territories. Supply convoys were disappearing. Communication relays were going offline. Repair crews were reporting that they could not fix the equipment failures because their tools were also mysteriously broken. Minute 7. The first Dominion fleet tried to respond to the crisis by moving toward the human vessels approaching their space. But when they tried to activate their weapon systems, nothing happened. The human technicians who maintained those weapons had removed critical components days earlier, waiting for the signal to act. Minute 10. Entire star systems began losing power as human engineers shut down the fusion reactors they had been operating. Planets that depended on imported food found their supply ships stranded in space. Military bases discovered that their computers could no longer access tactical information. Minute 15. Admiral Korthak, still aboard his flagship celebrating Katie's execution, received an urgent message from Dominion Command. The Empire was under attack, but no one could identify the enemy. There were no invading fleets, no bombing raids, no direct military action. The Empire was simply falling apart from the inside. Korthak rushed to his ship's bridge, where his officers were staring at screens full of error messages. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Sir, we're receiving reports of system failures throughout the Empire," his communications officer reported. "Power grids, transport networks, military systems, everything is shutting down." "Who is attacking us?" Korthak asked. "We don't know, sir. There are no enemy ships, no weapons fire. Our systems are just stopping." Korthak felt a cold fear in his stomach. "Show me the tactical display." The main screen showed a map of the Dominion Empire. Red dots appeared wherever systems were failing. There were thousands of them, spread across hundreds of worlds. The pattern made no sense. The failures were happening everywhere at once, but there was no coordination that Dominion intelligence could detect. "Sir," another officer said, "we're losing communication with Sector Command. Their systems just went dark." "What about the fleet moving to intercept the human ships?" "They're reporting multiple equipment failures. Weapons offline, navigation systems down, communications intermittent. Admiral Zek is requesting permission to withdraw for repairs." Korthak stared at the display. The red dots were multiplying. The failures were spreading faster than his forces could respond. "Get me a direct line to the Emperor." "Sir, the communication network to the capital is down. We can't reach Imperial Command." Minute 20. On the bridge of the human ship Defiant, Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with growing amazement. His communications officer was reporting updates from across the galaxy. Commander, we're receiving signals from human cells throughout the Empire. They're reporting successful operations against Dominion infrastructure. Power plants, communication centers, supply depots all going offline according to schedule. Jake shook his head in wonder. How many people are involved in this? Thousands, sir. Maybe tens of thousands. It looks like every human settlement in Dominion space had people waiting for this signal. Chief Engineer Danny Miller looked up from his station. Sir, I'm monitoring Dominion military communications. They're in complete chaos. Half their fleets can't communicate with command. The other half can't access their weapon systems. Jake turned to his tactical officer. What's our situation with the Dominion fleet? They've stopped advancing, sir. They're reporting massive equipment failures. Looks like they're trying to retreat, but their navigation systems are down. Jake felt a surge of hope. The impossible was happening. The Dominion Empire, which had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, was collapsing in real time. And it was collapsing because humans had finally decided to stop helping their oppressors. Minute 25. In the depths of space, the Dominion dreadnought Supremacy drifted helplessly. Its engines were offline. Its weapons were dead. Its communication systems were failing one by one. Admiral Korthak stood on the bridge watching his empire die. Sir, his chief engineer reported, we've identified the problem. The humans who maintained our systems sabotaged them before they left. They removed critical components, installed viruses, corrupted databases. Everything we depend on was built by human workers, and they've all turned against us. Korthak felt the cold grip of defeat. How is this possible? They're just humans. They're weak, cowardly, primitive. Apparently not, sir. The main screen flickered and went dark. Emergency lighting came on, casting red shadows across the bridge. The ship's computer voice began announcing system failures in a calm, mechanical tone. Life support at 60%. Artificial gravity offline. Main power failing. Switching to emergency reserves. Korthak realized with growing horror that his mighty flagship was dying, not from enemy fire or battle damage, but from simple neglect. The humans who had kept it running were gone, and no one else knew how to fix it. Minute 27. Across the galaxy, the cascade failure reached critical mass. The Dominion Empire had been like a vast machine with millions of moving parts, all working together. But the machine only functioned because oppressed peoples, especially humans, had been forced to maintain it. When those people stopped working, the machine broke down. When they actively sabotaged it, the machine destroyed itself. The Empire had no backup systems because they had never imagined that their servants would rebel. They had no alternative infrastructure because they had grown dependent on the very people they oppressed. The 27 minutes of Katie Sullivan's revolution were over. The 1,000-year Dominion Empire was finished, and across the galaxy, humans were finally free to determine their own destiny. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake Morrison received a message from the crippled Dominion flagship. Admiral Korthak wanted to talk. Admiral Korthak stood in the dim red light of his failing ship and activated the emergency communication system. The message went out on all frequencies, hoping someone would receive it. He was calling for help from the same humans he had tried to destroy. Human vessels, this is Admiral Korthak of the Dominion Fleet. I request immediate discussion with your commanders. On the bridge of the Defiant, Jake Morrison looked at his crew. They had watched the Dominion Empire collapse in less than half an hour. Now the alien who had killed Katie Sullivan was asking to talk. Should we answer him, sir? Asked Communications Officer Betty Clark. Jake thought for a moment. Put him through. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Korthak's bridge. The alien commander looked different now. His uniform was wrinkled, his expression was confused, and his ship was clearly dying around him. Commander Morrison, Korthak said, I need to understand what has happened. How did you coordinate such a massive attack? What weapons did you use? How many ships were involved? Jake almost laughed. We didn't attack you, Admiral. We just stopped helping you. That is impossible. Your people are scattered across the galaxy. They have no central command, no unified military, no advanced technology. How could they organize something like this? You're right about one thing, Jake replied. We don't have a central command. We have something better. We have people who care about each other. Korthak's face showed confusion. I do not understand. Jake turned to his communications officer. Betty, show the Admiral what we've been receiving. The screen split to show intercepts of human communications from across the galaxy. Messages were flowing between worlds, between ships, between individuals. But these were not military orders or strategic plans. They were personal messages. Tom, this is Sarah on Kepler Station. We got your message about Katie. The reactor here is offline. Thinking of you and your family. Mary, it's your brother Jim. Saw the broadcast. We're shutting down the transport hub here. Stay safe. All maintenance crews on Vega Prime. This is Chief Williams. We're going home. Leave the tools where they are. Time to be with our families. Korthak listened to message after message. Humans talking to friends, to family members, to co-workers they had never met in person. They were not following orders from generals or presidents. They were simply people who had decided together that enough was enough. This makes no sense, Korthak said. Without central authority, how do you maintain discipline? How do you ensure coordination? Jake smiled sadly. Admiral, you spent so long thinking of us as your property that you never bothered to understand what we actually are. We're not soldiers in your army. We're not pieces of your machine. We're human beings, and human beings take care of each other. But the complexity of this operation, Korthak insisted. The timing, the coordination across thousands of worlds, this required years of planning. You're right, Jake said. It did take years, but not the way you think. Jake gestured to his crew. Every person on this ship has family on other worlds, friends in other jobs, people they care about spread across the galaxy. When you scattered us throughout your empire, you thought you were weakening us. Instead, you gave us a network that spans every corner of known space. The communications officer spoke up. Admiral, we've been talking to each other for generations, sharing news, sending money home, helping friends find work. We built relationships across your entire empire. You just never noticed because you didn't think we mattered. Korthak was beginning to understand. The maintenance workers, the technicians, the data processors, they were all connected. Every single one, Jake confirmed. When you put humans in support roles throughout your empire, you put us exactly where we needed to be to bring it down. We maintained your ships so we knew how to disable them. We processed your data so we knew how to corrupt it. We transported your supplies so we knew how to make them disappear. On the tactical display, Jake could see more ships arriving. Not just human vessels, but ships from dozens of other species. The word had spread throughout the galaxy that the Dominion Empire was finished, and everyone who had suffered under their rule was coming to see it end. Admiral, said Jake's tactical officer, we're receiving signals from Altarian vessels, Rigelian ships, Centauri defense forces, even some Andromedian cruisers. Looks like representatives from over 40 species are heading this way. Jake turned back to Korthak. Did you really think humans were the only ones who hated your empire? We just happened to be in the right positions to do something about it, but we weren't working alone. The screen showed new messages coming in, these in multiple alien languages with human translations appearing below. Human friends, this is Captain Zek of the Altarian Republic. We received your signal. Our people are ready to reclaim our independence. Human allies, Commander Vex of the Rigelian Coalition sends greetings. We have been waiting for this day for 300 years. To our human brothers and sisters, the Centauri Assembly offers our full support in establishing a free galaxy. Korthak watched the messages scroll by with growing horror. How many species are involved in this rebellion? All of them, Jake said simply. Every intelligent species in your empire except the ones in charge. We didn't start a human revolution, Admiral. We started a galactic liberation movement. The truth was even more devastating than Korthak had imagined. For decades, humans had been doing more than just building their own networks. They had been reaching out to every oppressed species in the galaxy, sharing information, offering help, building connections. The Dominion had seen this as harmless social activity, because they could not imagine their subjects working together. "This is impossible," Korthak said. "Different species cannot cooperate. They have different languages, different cultures, different biology. They compete for resources." "That's what you told yourselves," Jake replied, "but it's not true. Intelligent beings have more in common than you think. We all want to live in peace. We all want to take care of our families. We all want freedom to make our own choices." Jake paused as another message came in. This one was from Captain Susan Martinez of the human vessel Relentless, which was approaching from the outer system. "Jake, this is Susan. I've got representatives from 26 different species aboard my ship. They want to discuss forming a new government based on cooperation instead of conquest. They're asking if humans will help lead the transition." Jake looked at the message, then back at Admiral Korthak. "For 1,000 years your empire ruled through fear and force. You convinced everyone that might makes right, that the strong should dominate the weak. But you forgot something important." "What?" Korthak asked. "The weak outnumber the strong, and when the weak decide to work together, they're not weak anymore." On the tactical display, the dots representing Dominion forces were disappearing one by one. Ships were surrendering, going offline, or simply drifting powerless in space. The red indicators showing system failures now covered the entire map. The Dominion Empire was not just defeated, it was gone. "What happens now?" Korthak asked. His voice was quiet, defeated. Jake considered the question. Around him, his crew was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Reports were coming in of celebrations on liberated worlds, of species declaring their independence, of former enemies working together to build something new. "Now we do what humans have always done," Jake said. "We clean up the mess and try to build something better." The screen went dark as the Supremacy's power finally failed completely. Admiral Korthak and his flagship disappeared into the darkness of space, along with the empire they had served. But across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds, lights were coming back on. Not the harsh lights of oppression, but the warm glow of freedom. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy had hope. 6 months after Katie Sullivan died, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of a space station that had not existed the day before. The station hung in orbit around New Haven, the small colony where everything had started. Below, he could see the lights of the settlement shining in the planet's night. The station was not built by one species or one government. Representatives from 43 different worlds had worked together to create it. Humans had provided the engineering plans. Altarians had supplied the metal. Rigelians had contributed the power systems. Centaurians had designed the life support. Every species that had suffered under the Dominion Empire had brought something to the project. They called it Katie Sullivan Memorial Station. Jake walked through the corridors, watching beings from across the galaxy work side by side. A human engineer was teaching a young Altarian how to repair fusion reactors. A Rigelian doctor was sharing medical knowledge with a human nurse. Children from a dozen different species played together in the station's gardens, while their parents discussed trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. It was not perfect. Different species had different needs, different customs, different ways of thinking. There were arguments and misunderstandings. Some worlds wanted to trade freely while others preferred isolation. Some species wanted strong military defenses, while others believed in pure pacifism, but they were trying. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy was run by cooperation instead of conquest. Jake made his way to the station's central hub, where a ceremony was about to begin. Today marked the official founding of the Free Worlds Alliance, a loose confederation of independent systems that would replace the Dominion Empire. Unlike the old empire, membership was voluntary. Any world could join or leave as they chose. Decisions were made by discussion and vote, not by force. The ceremony hall was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Jake saw familiar faces among the crowd. Captain Linda Hayes was there, along with Colonel Ryan Brooks and dozens of other humans who had helped in those crucial 27 minutes. But there were also aliens who had worked for decades to resist the Dominion in their own quiet ways. At the center of the hall stood a simple memorial. It was not grand or impressive. It was just a small maintenance bay, exactly like the one where Katie had worked on New Haven. The same type of fusion reactor hummed quietly in the corner. The same tools hung on the walls. Even the smell of machine oil and metal was the same. Plaque beside the memorial read, "In memory of Katie Sullivan, who kept the lights on. In honor of all those who refused to let them go out." Jake found his seat as the ceremony began. Captain Susan Martinez, who had become the first elected president of the Alliance, stepped up to speak. 6 months ago, Susan said, a young woman died because she would not abandon the people who depended on her. Katie Sullivan was not a soldier or a leader or a hero. She was just someone who did her job and cared about her neighbors. Susan paused, looking out at the crowd. But sometimes that is exactly what heroism looks like. Sometimes changing the galaxy starts with one person who decides to do the right thing even when it is dangerous. Jake thought about the months since the Dominion's collapse. It had not been easy. Some former Dominion officials had tried to maintain control over their regions. A few species had attempted to build their own small empires. There had been conflicts, negotiations, compromises, and difficult decisions. But slowly, steadily, things were getting better. Trade routes were reopening under fair agreements. Refugees were returning to their home worlds. Scientific knowledge was being shared freely instead of hoarded by the elite. Children were learning about other species as friends and neighbors instead of enemies or servants. The alliance we are founding today is not perfect, Susan continued. It will face challenges. There will be disagreements and conflicts. Some members will make mistakes. Others will leave and rejoin. That is the nature of free societies. She gestured toward the memorial. But as long as we remember why we are here, as long as we remember that our strength comes from caring about each other, we will endure. The Dominion Empire lasted 1,000 years by making people afraid. The Free Worlds Alliance will last longer by giving people hope. After the ceremony, Jake walked to the memorial bay. He was not surprised to find Admiral Korthak there, staring at the simple tools and equipment. The former Dominion commander was not in chains or a prison cell. The Alliance had decided that revenge would not help anyone heal. Instead, Korthak was serving as a consultant, helping them understand how the old empire had functioned so they could avoid making the same mistakes. "I still do not understand," Korthak said without looking at Jake. "How does this work? How do you make decisions without a central authority? How do you maintain order without force?" Jake stood beside him looking at the memorial. "We argue a lot. We vote on things. Sometimes the votes are close and some people are unhappy with the results. But they accept it because they know they will get another chance to vote next time. But what if they are wrong? What if the majority makes a bad decision? Then we learn from it and try to do better next time," Jake said. The Dominion way was to have one person or group make all the decisions and force everyone else to obey. That prevented some bad decisions, but it also prevented learning and growth. Korthak was quiet for a long moment. "In the old empire, I was taught that strength meant the ability to control others, that the purpose of power was to impose your will on those who were weaker." "And now?" Jake asked. "Now I see that real strength comes from people choosing to work together. And real power comes from being trusted to help instead of feared for the harm you can cause." A group of children ran past them, laughing as they chased each other through the corridors. Jake recognized some of them from New Haven, including the daughter of Pete Davis, Katie's old supervisor. She was playing with a young Altarian girl and a Rigelian boy, all of them wearing the same school uniforms. "The children adapt quickly," Korthak observed. "Children usually do," Jake replied. "They haven't learned to hate yet. They just see other kids to play with." Jake checked his chronometer. He had a meeting with the Alliance Council in an hour to discuss establishing new trade routes. Then he needed to review reports from the exploration teams that were mapping systems abandoned during the chaos of the Empire's collapse. There was always more work to do, but first, he had one more stop to make. Jake took a shuttle down to New Haven's surface to the power station where Katie had worked. Pete Davis was still there, now serving as the chief engineer for the entire colony. The old man had aged in the past 6 months, but his eyes were brighter than before. "How are things running?" Jake asked. Pete smiled. "Smooth as ever. We've got some new apprentices learning the systems. Young people from a half-dozen different species. Turns out the basic principles of fusion power work the same way no matter what planet you're from." They walked through the station together. Jake could hear the quiet hum of the reactors, the steady heartbeat that kept 10,000 people alive and comfortable. In the main control room, a young human woman was working at Katie's old station, monitoring the power output and checking the safety systems. "She reminds me of Katie," Pete said quietly. "Same attention to detail, same sense of responsibility." Jake nodded. "What was Katie's favorite saying about her job?" Pete smiled. "She used to say that keeping the lights on was not just about electricity. It was about hope. As long as the lights stayed on, people knew that someone cared about them. Someone was looking out for them." As Jake prepared to leave, Pete handed him something. It was a small toolkit, well-worn and practical. Katie's tools. "She would have wanted these to keep working," Pete said. "Maybe you know someone who could use them." Jake accepted the tools. Back on the memorial station, he placed them carefully in the display case next to Katie's memorial. A new plaque appeared the next day, added by someone Jake never identified. "For those who keep the lights on." Years later, when historians wrote about the fall of the Dominion Empire and the rise of the Free Worlds Alliance, they would debate the causes and consequences. They would analyze military strategies, economic factors, and political movements. They would write volumes about the complex forces that shaped galactic civilization. But Jake Morrison knew the truth was simpler. The galaxy changed because one young woman decided to do her job, even when it cost her life. She kept the lights on, and her example inspired billions of others to do the same. The Dominion Empire had ruled through fear and force for 1,000 years. But it took only 27 minutes for people to remember that there was another way to live. A way based on caring for each other, working together, and keeping the lights on for everyone. Katie Sullivan never saw the galaxy she helped create. But her light still shines in every corner of it, carried by everyone who chooses hope over fear, cooperation over conquest, and service over selfishness. The lights stayed on, and they always would.